He must be
Joey,
from.
and then just hit the exit.
Joey does that mess.
Who does it?
Joey does that mess.
It's a bowl of cereal.
Joey
And
does
we
do
are
it.
live. We are live.
Take Six podcast.
What is up? The Spread Love Podcast. What's happening, everybody? We are live. We're here. And we have a special guest in the house, Mr. Mervyn Warren. Give him a hand clap.
Man,
Hello.
Woo!
Give
Man. So we're going to jump right into this. We had Merv on before, and we had a really spirited, amazing conversation. And so we wanted to have him back on because what we're going to start talking about are some of the very early times when not only our group was formed, but Merv, back when you had groups even before getting to Oakwood University or college at the time. Some of the differences for all of us between what was considered traditional music at the time and this contemporary thing, which had all this harmony and all this stuff in it. I'll go back to the beginning of, and I said this story to Alvin before anybody else got on. He didn't know that when I started this group, when we went from 4 to 5 people, it was a wrap. I couldn't audition for the Aeolians. I don't think Mark could sing in the Aeolians at that point or whatever, because they had a rule that if you had more than 4 people, you could not be in the Aeolians.
Claude,
What, Mark?
did you want to be in the Aeolians?
Well, no, but I'm just
Thank you.
The point.
but they basically they banned us. Do you remember that, Merv and Mark?
I remember very well. Then, do you remember the reason for the rule? Just so because it actually wasn't arbitrary.
Oh, tell me.
For people who don't know, for people who don't remember, people who are watching, the Aeolians was Oakwood's touring choir, and I mean, 2 or 3 months out of the 2 or 3 weekends out of a month, we'd be off somewhere doing concerts in various cities, and Alma got tired, the director, Alma Blackman, got tired of members having groups that had their own agendas. And we were very busy, we meaning us, and our we had a lot of stuff going on, and other groups. She got tired of us having to tell her, oh, we can't come to your concert because we have our own concert in Memphis or in Dallas.
Well, it was a travel schedule issue.
Yeah. And so she got tired of fielding all of those people saying, "Oh, I can't go with you this weekend. I can't go."
I just thought she hated me.
So she didn't hate you. So she made this rule, which was like, okay, just be in a quartet, but in her mind, anything bigger than that meant the possibility of more people leaving. That's what the rule was. So that said, I never left the Aeolians, nor did I leave Alliance. So I kind of skated by. I kind of skated by a little bit.
Okay, so Merv.
That's why all these years I thought it was an issue of the content.
He bowed to you.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
Okay.
It was. And I mean, honestly, I was waiting any day for her to pull me in that little office and shake her finger at me and tell me, "You are not," but she never did. And I kept singing, and I was waiting for it to happen. And so
she never mentioned it at all to you?
No, she let me slide. She let me
Merv,
Wow.
you were the man.
Merv was the man.
He was the man. And
So
At the time, I think it might have been just one neighbor looking out for another neighbor, because didn't she live nearby?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, she literally across the street from my parents.
Literally.
Yeah, I used to cut her grass, and I used to do that stuff when I was growing up.
Teacher's
there you
pet.
go, Claude.
Yeah, teacher's pet.
There you go.
Claude. You just weren't putting in the work.
But wasn't there, Claude? You told me there was one concert that you got to perform with the Aeolians.
Yes. So Merv had done a composition that the Aeolians later that year. Was this what year was this? Was this 80 or 81? Do you remember, Merv?
It was way
81. That was my sophomore year.
Well, 81 was my fresh.
Yeah, that was
81, 82 was my freshman year.
Okay.
81.
I graduated in 85.
Okay.
So between them.
So yes, Merv did
later. Because I
Yeah.
had long since been
Before-
kicked out of Aeolians myself.
Whoa.
That first
Mark,
year I was an
man.
alternate.
what's happening
And-
here?
and
Hey, man.
Alma and I just came to a point where it's either you or me.
Wait, tell us a story. Did something in particular
Were
happen?
you in the
Mark?
same office at that point too?
Oh, I got called into the office, and I was only an alternate. I wasn't even supposed to travel.
That's right. You were an alternate. I forgot
Yeah,
about that.
so I was never really.
So wait a minute. That's like Michael Jordan being cut from the team. How were you an alternate?
Even the alternates couldn't.
I was not
Because
important.
he didn't cut the back of the
He
grass.
didn't cut. Yeah, he didn't take care of the pool. He had an option to be the pool boy, but he said no.
No.
Oh, this poor boy. Oh my
But
god.
yeah, I did that, and you know, it actually came to a point where she called me about the group, us, and just said, you know, you can't have it anymore. So I said, okay, I can't do that. Then my choice is
So let
Aeolians by
me tell you what I've always wondered, Mark. So I started the group, then the two of you guys came in and we had this sextet. You know, I had Alma for music theory my freshman year. And I was flunking out of music theory because I never went to class. So she was always mad at me. But I would only show up for the test and I would get 100 on the test all the time. And she'd be so mad at me. And so for years I was like, does she just have this thing for me? Because she was like, this dude won't come to class and people want to cheat off of his exam. So I don't know, man.
I remember that. And I remember her not liking the fact that despite you skipping her class, you always aced the test. You knew the material. She hated that. She
hated it, dude. And we would have like ear training and stuff like that. And she'd try to get me, and I'd always get it right. She'd be like, "Oh, Mr. McKnight."
That's fine.
So wait, let me just go back and get some clarification for my own situation here. You were never in the Aeolians, Claudia Mac?
Never. I never even thought about auditioning because I started my own group and I was like, this is what I want to do.
I thought all three of you guys were in the Aeolians. I knew that Mark got kicked out, but I thought you got kicked out too.
Mm-mm.
You
I
know,
got kicked out of other things.
Almost a whole year.
Wow.
I got kicked out of school later in the
The
year.
entire school.
And shit.
You don't like to
Yo,
come to class, just stay on.
Man.
Right. So Merv, let's go back,
All right,
man.
all right,
So again, this contemporary and traditional thing.
right.
You grew up pretty much on Oakwood's campus, right?
Yes.
And the music that you were listening to as a young boy was what kind of stuff?
So you mean like in the home, at home?
Well,
Or-
mostly when you would go to church and hang out. I don't know if you were hanging out on the campuses or whatever like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, you can talk about the home and everywhere. I want to get an idea of what your upbringing was that would make you go into this other thing that was so contemporary, certainly at the
Okay.
time.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I was naturally inclined toward jazz, and I don't know why I didn't ask for that. It just happened. My parents listened to, I think I said this when we did our other thing. My parents, it was everything from Andre Crouch and Edwin Hawkins to Mantovani to the Swingle Singers. And I mean, I distinctly remember a lot of Swingle Singers, or maybe I liked it and so I played it a lot. You know,
Right.
but that's kind of a cross section, easy listening to light jazz, if you want to call it jazz, and then gospel stuff. And then at the church and at the school, you know, I mean, there were like groups like O'Mara's groups, and there were other quartets, and there were other, I mean, there was always all kinds of music at Oakwood, everything from choirs to quartets and trios. So, but there was always, I mean, back then the church was super, super, super conservative. No drums under any circumstances, and in a general sense, no complex rhythm, or even implied rhythm, really. So that's why I think Oakwood groups always sort of lean toward harmony, because for whatever reason, it seemed like you could explore harmony, and none of the faculty members would get upset about that. They were okay with that, as long as they didn't feel a beat or hear something pounding or hear something, you know, instruments. They, you know, even the piano kind of got on their nerves a little bit sometimes, which is why, as you remember, who was it? Jimmy Wilson used to play all that jazz on the organ, straight up jazz on the organ. And we would all flip out, but because it was an organ, the pastor of the church thought it was perfectly acceptable.
Because the pastor didn't know the song. And because the pastor didn't really know the song,
No,
it just went kind of over his head.
Exactly.
Under the radar. Well, let me ask you this, Merv. So when did the distinction start to be made, from your recollection, of that being that whole skew towards sacred only in the church versus other buildings on campus, such as the gym, Moran Hall, being able to take it a little bit further and kind of stretch past the sacred music more into more contemporary stuff? Because for a while there, I remember, you know, you just couldn't do that kind of stuff in the church.
Oh, no, they pulled the plug in the gym too.
Yes, they
really.
Eventually they did. Eventually they did. Yeah, there was a point where, because the students got, I think, as I recall, this might even been before I got to the college, right? Because I was up there a lot when I was a teenager. But there was a point where the students knew that they couldn't do whatever at the church. So they were always like these student functions at the gym or at Moran Hall, where they could let loose and they could do other stuff. And so that's where, you know, there was a lot more expression and creativity there. And then anytime you did anything at the church, it had to be toned down. It had to be toned down. You had to leave out the drums. You had to leave out everything.
I distinctly remember, I don't know if you were at this concert, Merv, or anybody, or Mark as well, because Elder Tatris was the associate pastor at Oakwood, correct? Do you remember his family coming and doing a concert at Moran Hall?
No.
Like right after prayer meeting. Remember when Moran Hall used to have prayer meeting in Moran Hall?
Yeah.
Right after prayer meeting, Elder Tatris's brothers had a group. And I mean, they were running the aisles with their electric guitars and everything.
Oh, wow. I do not.
And by the time the concert was over, I think it might have been my family and just two other families that were left. And Elder Tatris.
Elder Tatris was not the pastor anymore.
No, I don't remember that at all. But that's a trip.
Wow.
That is a trip.
Okay, so Merv, I'm going to take you back, man. Because people on the thread, and I see a lot of people saying, hey, Merv, blah, blah, blah. Let's go C.E. Mosley.
Right.
Yes.
So
a little bit of history on your granddaddy and how some of this was under his auspices as well, as far as some of the more traditional and conservative stuff that was going on.
Right. So yeah, my grandfather, Calvin Mosley. So he did have a legitimate distinction, and his legitimate distinction was that he was the first man of color or black man, either way you want to put it, ever to hold an office with the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, which is in Washington, D.C. So that was a big deal. And I don't know what decade that was in, but I'm guessing that was in the 40s or 50s, something like that. But so that was a big deal. He was the first black man to ever hold office with the worldwide Seventh-day Adventist Church. And that's what I was sort of born into. So I was always, sort of up against his taste. And by the time my music was developing at Oakwood, and our music was developing at Oakwood, he was older, but he was still one of the elders of the church. And he was still this kind of presence looming over my life.
Power.
Huh?
Wielding power.
Yeah, wielding power, right. And, he had a lot of experiences. I'll never forget. We performed one time. We had performed, oh no, I'm sorry, it wasn't one of our performances. Somebody had performed at Oakwood, one of the student groups. I'm sure, as I recall, it was relatively tame, but he was so ultra conservative that everything offended him. Everything offended him musically. And I remember that he came to my parents' house where we were eating. And he started going on this whole diatribe about how the whatever song had been performed in the church that day by this student group, it reminded him of, and he was a missionary, I should say that. He had been a missionary in Africa. And he said that this song this was the orgy beat. He said it had the orgy beat.
Orgy beat?
Oh yeah, I never told you the story. Oh yeah,
No.
it had the orgy beat. So I said to my grandfather,
He
"What
knows
is an orgy beat?" And he said, "Well, when I was in such and such a land," he named a specific place and a specific tribe that he had been working with as a missionary. And he said, and he described this. He said, you know, when a baby was born, they played a certain beat, and when a couple got married, they played a certain beat, or when someone died, they played a certain beat. And when they were going to have an orgy, they played a certain beat. And that song that I heard today in that church was the same beat as that orgy. So I had this whole conversation. I kid you not.
So wait.
I said,
I also heard this.
Uh-huh.
Before you finish this story.
Okay.
Feel free to go back to it.
I will.
I heard that C.E. Mosley, your grandfather, actually, when he was very young, played jazz himself.
I don't know if that's true. I honestly don't know. What I do know for an absolute fact is, and I don't know if this story is getting a little conflated, his father was a jazz musician. His father was a jazz bass player, and he played on the Chitlin circuit. And his father was a deadbeat dad. He didn't make enough money to support the family. He was often off doing whatever he was doing. And so my grandfather formed an opinion of jazz musicians that all jazz musicians do not deserve.
Wow. That's deep.
That's insight, man. That's insight.
Especially given his leadership role, that kind of shaped the Black Adventist perspective, I would assume, because he was the man. So wow. Yeah.
And I tell you, a lot of stuff, I learned a lot of this stuff actually after he died. As a matter of fact, I learned at my grandfather's funeral that his father, the jazz musician, was Black and his mother was white. I spent my entire life not knowing that.
Wow.
Yeah, this is some Westworld stuff.
So his father was this Black jazz musician that did not provide for the family, and my grandfather, in his mind, all jazz musicians were evil.
There you have it.
So the second you played a chord, you were doomed.
Absolutely, yeah. And so he was he had all these strange connections. And so like this back to this orgy beat thing, you know, and so I had this conversation with him and I said, so when did you hear this beat, so to speak? And he was like, oh, this was, 20 years ago in Tanzania or wherever it was. I don't remember. And I said, you cannot, that was a group of people who in that country, in that tribe, they got together and said, okay, from now on, whenever we play, ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba, that means wedding or whatever. It's just decisions that they made.
Okay.
That has nothing to do with people in Alabama 20 or 30 years later singing another song. I said, there are only 12 notes on the piano.
And when did you get struck by lightning?
Yeah, so I tried to reason with him.
How did that go over?
It didn't work. It didn't work. He was just stuck. And I realized, I think that day actually, I realized that there was no point. It's like politics or whatever. People when they've made up their minds, there's very little you can do.
That's right.
So I think it hit me that day. And by the way, I was about, I don't know how old I was. I feel like I was 16, 18, 19, somewhere around in there. And it just hit me. I just said, this is futile. This is just futile.
Well,
so once you made that decision,
yes,
and then started or continued doing the kind of music that you were doing, did you ever have any other conversations with him about your specific music?
Yes. Well, not conversations. He implied things, or he would say that. I remember one time, so you remember at the church, remember how the piano is in like a little pit?
Mm-hmm.
The piano was sunken in just like a little pit, just so you're down a couple of steps or something like that. And then right next to the piano, and all along the stage, was where all the elders would sit, all from one side to the other. So when I'm sitting here at the piano like this, to my right were seats for an elder. And I remember one time I was playing for somebody, and it was just piano, and I was playing for somebody singing. I also know from playing there for so many years that that church had horrible acoustics.
Horrible.
And a soloist standing 20 feet from the piano literally sometimes could not hear the piano. So you had to play just a hair louder than you normally would in order for them to hear. This was before sound system was upgraded. So I'm playing at the level that I knew was required for a singer. My grandfather was sitting right there, and he turns around while I'm in the middle of playing. He turns around and goes, "You're playing too loud." And I said, "No, I'm not." And I just kept playing.
Wow.
Oh my Lord.
No, I'm not.
Wow.
That's
Wait, I know. Did it end there?
It ended there.
Wow.
There. So, yeah, that conversation ended there. He didn't say anything else that day. No.
Wow.
It was always just this, And so now you remember when, take 6 guys. Remember when Huntsville Times did that article on us? Oakwood College group jazzes up gospel sound.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy, that was
It
blasphemy.
seemed like he
The
walked
death
to
knell.
church with the newspaper under his.
Yeah, they hated that.
Under his arm.
I remember coming there in '85, and he was still. I mean, they had just named the religion complex after him,
Right.
And he was such a force that he preached a sermon, and I remember the whole apex of the sermon was, "Please promise me that we'll never have drums in this church. We'll never have drums in this service." And he turned around and made Ward or whoever was there promise. He was like, and he tearfully turned around and said, "Please never have drums." So to this day, when I go back to Oakwood and they're jamming, I'm like,
Right.
oh man.
Yeah, remember a few years ago, I mean, some of you guys were there, and they were doing some of my stuff. Well, you all were there, and they were doing, and when they were doing like Joyful from Sister Act 2, and they're up on the stage and they're doing choreography, that blew my mind because and there's a drummer.
I even think they have a drum enclosure now.
Right, they got a drum enclosure. Yeah, as you know, none of that was. And I said that when I got up on the stage. I said the irony of this moment is, as I was growing up, none of this that's happening tonight could even be performed in this room.
Right.
Oh no, no.
Yeah.
It took 25 years for that stuff to happen.
Right.
That's a lot of evolution.
We never. I don't know if you know this, Merv, or remember this or realize this, but it wasn't until maybe years ago that we ever even sang at Oakwood College
in the church. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In the White House a bunch of times, the Kremlin a bunch of times, Japan 1,000 times.
Right.
Never in Oakwood Church.
Wow.
And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this conversation and the one that's going to happen next week. Do you remember, Merv, the Newbold College experience?
I remember that. I remember the name Newbold College, but I don't remember
Merv.
Before our project came out, we
jog
did
your memory.
to the UK.
Okay.
First time over, we were
The
there.
night
We were
before
over
it
there,
came out.
and we went to the college, and we were doing. I think we were in the middle of David and Goliath, and they stopped the concert, and literally had an argument in the audience.
Yes,
between people that wanted to shut it down, and people were
They
like,
had a
"No,
civil war at
let them
Newbold."
sing."
And they
It's
pointed it
so
out.
traumatic. Merv, remember?
I don't remember. No, I don't think it's because of the trauma, but it's age. I do not remember that. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And we literally left the stage and went to the side.
Okay, so
While
let's tell it for the audience who's watching who doesn't know the story. I can try to kick off to as much as I remember. So our very first trip to Europe, as far as a group, and just on the eve of our release of the Take Six project. Take Six, doobie doo, bop, 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 that thing. It was actually first released in the UK because we were going there on a tour. Got there, and the very first concert, well, we did something in Rotterdam, Holland, and then the very first thing we did was at Newbold College, which is a Seventh-day Adventist college in the UK.
Yeah.
There had been some stuff between turf war between traditional style and the contemporary style, between the students and between the faculty. So we walked in on stage to do our show unaware that any of this was going on. One or two songs.
We were invited by the student body versus the faculty.
Right. So in the middle of this show, in the middle of a song, like Mark said, someone stood up from one faction and said, "You guys stop singing this music. This is an abomination," or whatever it was. Somebody else on the other side of the crowd jumped up. "No, you keep singing this music. This is what we need." And we're watching and we're watching and we're watching. And finally,
during the concert.
And Dave,
and we walked off the stage. That was at least 30 years ago, right?
Yeah. So here's the crazy thing. The way we all remember it is different as well, because I reached out to Mike Johnson, who was, I guess, that original promoter. And yesterday he said he wasn't there.
Oh, really?
Yes. But he has a bunch of information about people who were there and the fallout after that show. So he'll be with us next week. So I have to hear, his take on it, because it's really interesting to me, because we all remember things differently.
Right.
That's really strange, because I thought he was kind of acting as
he was the promoter for the main
manager. Yeah,
that's what I thought too.
He went to every gig with us on that trip, I thought.
We'll have to find out the exactness of what Alvin is saying, because that's how we all pretty much remember it as well. And I don't know if he is doing the Merv route and saying he's old and he doesn't remember.
I remember.
Or if he's doing the Peter rule, not me, Lord, not me.
I'm just speculating. Maybe Mike, I do remember him because he's contacting me every now and then. Maybe he booked these various shows for us, but Newbold heard we were coming and just said, "Hey, would you guys come to our school?"
Perhaps.
Maybe.
Maybe.
It might have been one of those kind of things.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to find out. And I'm going to reach out to some of the people who I know were there, because it'd be cool if they were students at the time or had come in, from the public to see what they felt about what was going on.
Right.
Because we just came into this firestorm. We had no idea, never finished the show, and just left.
Right.
Someone in the chat room, I believe his name is Simon, is saying the person who would be able to tell us is Sean Douglas.
Sean Douglas or Ken Burton. Okay. Yeah.
Was Sean there? I'm not sure that Sean was there.
And Ken Burton is actually watching, because I just saw his name go by on the chat stream, and he was basically saying, "Careful, UK in the house." So he might have been a student there at the same time as well.
Okay,
but the cool thing about this is, for some of us, it was like this ultimate traumatic thing, but some of us, it was like, I guess what it implies, Merv, is that you would come through so much stuff that it was like, okay, whatever, and you kept going on with life and your career. The rest of it was like,
yeah, I don't think any of us were really shaken from this thing, because we'd already received resistance from the early days anyway, and it wasn't an Adventist college and a white one at that. So you almost expected it.
Exactly.
So when they shut our concert down, we're like, well, so okay.
It's like, wait a minute, this is Dean
College would shut us down all the time.
So
Yeah, we're shut down.
We still got
we made it.
Shut us down all the time. Yeah.
Do you guys remember when we went to we had a concert in Minneapolis, and there was a contract that we would always get picked up and taken to the venue. We had done our sound check. We were at the hotel, and we're in the lobby waiting to be picked up. And we're looking at the lobby and like, wait, but the show isn't, where's our car? And whoever was with us, Holly or whoever it was, called and said, where's the car? And they said, well, we just figured that because the venue was 2 blocks away that you guys would just walk. Meanwhile, it was like,
is that when it was super cold too?
It was like minus 20 degrees. It was minus 20 degrees. And so our manager or whoever was there was like, no, they cannot walk they're an a cappella group. They can't walk and have their, their throats frozen. Anyway, the reason I'm telling that story is I had family on the Mosley side. I had family in Minneapolis that weekend. They refused to come to our concert because our music was satanic. They didn't know.
Wait. Not just bad. We were all the way to satanic?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. By then, all the major churches were preaching against us,
Well, and that's another
by that time.
At that point, we had all sat through so many sermons that by name, Take Six or Special Blend, you're going to hell, or they're singing the wrong music, or you can't listen to or they're deceived, or they're being led down the wrong. That it kind of like, well, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
It wasn't the end of the world for us.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all. And we were getting so much. I don't want to say accolades, but we were being warmly welcomed by so many other communities.
Right.
And it was just like, after a while, you're just like, okay, yeah, whatever, you guys, you just kind of ride it off because everybody else was having a good time and wanted more. So you just kind of write it off and just like, okay, whatever.
And if you think about it, actually, it is the church's early rejection of us that actually allowed us to actually kind of go into another market and just be opened up to what we became.
Right.
I wonder if the church did not reject us, would we have even still had the same success?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a really good question. And I had conversations with that about, my parents were always very supportive, so no issue with my parents. But I remember having that conversation with my dad, who later was in administration, because you guys might remember when Sed and I were in grad school, we had barely been there for a few months, and the University of Alabama, like they had a magazine, they put Sed and they put Sed and me on the cover. And Oakwood would never in a million years do something like that, and I remember showing that to my dad, and I said, this school is encouraging its students to excel, and they are celebrating the students who have excelled.
Right.
And I said, this is something that Oakwood does not do and should do. And that was the conversation we had.
Was he receptive of that idea?
He was receptive. I don't know that he didn't have unilateral power to make things happen. But I told him, I really think you guys should do better, because naturally, as soon as we graduated, they started asking us to contribute. And I said to him, why would I contribute to a school that fought me the whole time I was there?
Right.
Whereas this school puts me on the cover of their magazine. I'm not that in and of itself isn't the point, but the point is they are welcoming their students and encouraging their students to do what they do. Yeah. Which school am I going to be more likely to contribute to? Yeah. And I just said, I think Oakwood needs to rethink this. I don't know what happened. We haven't talked about it since then.
For me, I would like to. Us talking about this stuff is not bashing Oakwood or not trying to do it. It's what is it saying is sometimes you're going to have to believe in yourself, despite what other people are saying to you. You're going to get discouraged. You're going to get words. You're going to get sermons, all of this stuff. But if you believe in yourself, you can achieve. I remember another professor who shall remain nameless. We were nominated for a Grammy, and I was in denominational history. And this professor was like, son, you don't need to go. I was asking for permission to go to the Grammys and come back. Son, you don't need to go to the Grammys. It's what, did I mess up, Claude?
I know that accent. Go ahead, though.
I know too.
You're doing such a great job. Now I know exactly who you are.
Class is important. The Grammys are not important. I'm thinking to myself, but sir, you're going to be teaching about Take Six from this very class. We're making denominational history. How can you not see that? And of course he didn't.
Right.
Well, that's a good follow-up question, though, Ben, to see if they ever did teach about Take Six in denominational history.
Wow.
I don't know, but all the same Theo majors that once preached about us are now calling us for benefits.
Donations. And,
yeah. The
Yeah.
same people.
Merv, let me go back to this. Merv, so you've had a ton of groups and have done music from the time you were probably 7, 8 years old, or whatever. Was there ever a time, as contemporary as you were and continue to be, that you're like, man, I just don't know if I should be doing this?
No, there was never a time. And I don't know if that was, tenacity, stubbornness. But I mean, we were, I would listen to records and, heard other people doing stuff. And I knew that I can do that. I can do that. And if they can do it, I can do it. I mean, that was my attitude. They can do it. I can do it. I didn't know exactly how or when the break would happen. But I always felt, pretty secure. At least I felt that sense of determination that I was going to go as far as I could. I was going to go as far as I could, and just do the best that I could. I was, and I think that's what enabled me to sort of deal with the stuff with my grandfather, because I felt secure in myself, and I have my parents' support to their credit also. If my parents had not supported me, that would have been a lot more difficult. A lot more.
Did your parents ever let on or talk to you about if your grandfather gave them hell about you and your music?
No, not about my music, but I do know that one day I was up in the attic in my parents' house looking for something, and I found songs written out that my mom had written when she was at Oakwood. She wanted to be a musician.
That's Prince.
Huh?
You're Prince.
Yeah. She had written some songs, but she had been discouraged from pursuing the arts because her father thought that he just didn't think. Oh, and we did. Okay, claw back to your question. I remember talking to him about that, because his whole thing, well, obviously he was very, very religious. And I said, so if as you believe, God gave her this talent, then who were you to tell her not to use it?
To stifle it, yeah.
And he couldn't really answer that question.
Wow.
But yeah, so she wanted to pursue music, but she was discouraged.
Wow.
But she played.
She played piano. Yeah, she taught me at the beginning. Yeah, she taught me. And she was an Aeolian. And then she wrote some songs on her own, but never pursued it.
Did you actually start playing? Did you take the sheet music out and start going through it?
I went through it. Yeah, they were very hymn-like.
Right.
Very, very, very hymn-like. But they were original pieces. Like, just like out of a hymnal, and they had lyrics, and yeah, they were just, but it was that style.
I love that.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
So one of the questions in the chat room were people asking, were all of our parents supportive of our dreams? And I can start and say absolutely, and you can kind of go around the circle. You guys want to speak on that? We know what Merv was saying. Anybody else?
Sure. Well, my grandfather and Merv's grandfather were good friends. My grandfather was a pastor as well. He pastored First Church, and he was proud that he and I were really close anyway. So we would not really talk about the style of music that we were singing, but all of the places that I was able to see around the world were places that, in my family, only he and I could discuss. So that actually added to our camaraderie with the travels that we were doing. And my parents were kind of on the fence because they really wanted me to be an engineer, and I really wanted to be a musician. So matter of fact, I remember my dad flying in a guy from New York City to prove to me that a career in music only lasts at max 10 to 12 years. And then where are you going to be? I was sitting there in the living room like, I'm not even sure why we're having this conversation, but okay, then if it's only going to be that short, then I can do that and then come back. Right. And then that was that. But other than that, yeah, they were very supportive. But it was, I think it was also, a change in my perspective. Because, you know, when you're young, you feel like you're being restricted with some of these rules that are in place. I guess I finally got to the point where I was able to say, it's equally wrong of me to impose something that they feel is wrong on them. So as long as we can have a sort of a stalemate where you guys can be in your sacred music corner and I don't say anything about that to you, and I can be in my more contemporary style / jazz corner, and that's okay with you too, especially as you can see over time that it's not really changing my belief in God. So, so, you know, we had to come to that agreement slowly over time, really. And it was, I noticed me giving into their perspective and giving them the grace and freedom to me not feeling upset about their perspective as well. Kind of opened the door for me.
Nice. Anybody else? Especially like Joey and Christian.
Very supportive. But there came a time, I remember when we were starting to tour, where I was going more from school. And I remember my mom, you know, she always wanted me to be able to do music so I could play for the church, hymns for the church, but not, you know, go and do that. She didn't think that was actually feasible. And I remember I was gone. We were on the road somewhere weekend after weekend. And then she was like, stay in school. You ain't no damn businessman. You don't need a in your room. Like, Mom, my manager needs to be able to contact me. So it just wasn't happening. But yeah, they were supportive gentlemen.
Yeah.
Christian Dentley, what about you, brother?
Man, my parents were.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, my parents were were extremely supportive. Still are. My mom, I'll never forget my mom saying, you know, son, you are a Porsche. You are designed for the Autobahn. There are no limits. You should, you know, just go after it. You know, it's all my parents' music, ministry, and media. That's what my family's thing is that God gave us. So yeah, always been supportive. My dad always made sure that we had the tools to be able to create, regardless of whether it was video, music, or whatever. And maybe that's because, you know, in the denomination that I'm from, we didn't really have the orgy beat, so they weren't afraid.
We love the orgy beat, as a matter of fact.
That's what it is.
The OB is
orgy in A flat, please.
Yeah, so yeah, we didn't have the old orgy beat, so said that a little loud. My son's in the other room is going to ask me what an orgy is.
Oh my god! And then you have to play that beat.
Son, when you hear this,
the room.
Oh my god!
I don't know who's watching on Facebook, but I have a feeling there are going to be some conversations about this going through the circle.
Pretty sure, especially if they didn't hear the story earlier and they're just now.
Right.
And they just tuned in for that.
Yeah.
Darn you, Von Thompson.
Go back and check the story so that you don't get anything twisted.
Merv came up with the story. It's all him.
Yeah. So, guys, in the Kibble household, what was it like?
I'll let you go first, Joey.
Well, I guess during when I was about to, you know, follow up with you, Merv, it was really, my parents did not want me to drop out of school because that was just a death knell. You know, you're not going to end up being anything. I'm just going to start this life of profligacy. And strangely enough, I was in Dr. Harold Anthony's class, his music class. I guess it was music theory. And I didn't hear about this until later, but my father ended up crossing paths with him and asked him, hey, man, you know, you're his music teacher. What do you really feel about him, you know, going on the road and, you know, going on tour and all this kind of stuff? And strangely, Dr. Anthony was like, look, there are things I will never be able to teach him out of a book. Let him go and experience this in different cultures, learning different languages, immersed in different types of music. I'll never be able to show him that. And from that point on, my father's opinion of the whole thing, he just kind of backed off of everything. And I never knew why. In fact, I never knew this whole exchange or I didn't know this whole exchange happened until much later. So, that's kind of where they stood with me.
Wow.
Now, Mark might have an earlier story.
Well, for me, I never really got resistance. I never got resistance, especially from my parents. They were always concerned, I finished school. I didn't study music. I studied business, and they were like, well, when are you going to get a job? I remember going to Hartford, Connecticut, trying to have an interview with the Hartford insurance company. And they were all excited about that. And of course, people up there saw right through me. And, I came back and, well, like, what are you going to do? And next thing you know, I hadn't been in touch with them that much, and we were already being successful. So, I never actually heard the resistance. I heard about it, but I never heard it directly. So, there were people that doubted what we were going to do. And, honestly, we didn't even know that we were going to be this successful. But, I just heard that people were like, shaking their heads and, wondering what was going on, but I never got the resistance myself. The only real resistance that I got was from faculty at Oakwood, and we already talked about that.
Right.
Well, just so you know, and this may add perspective, whatever stance he took in front of people in his church, anything you all recorded, anything that showed up on a tape, my dad got that stuff, and we would be playing it left and right behind closed doors. I mean, Merv, they joke me so hard because they feel like I know the Special Blend stuff and the Alliance stuff like the back of my hand. Mm-hmm. It was because my dad and I would play this stuff over and over. I mean, if Mark ever brought a tape home, we had that thing dubbed at least 5 times so that we could listen to it ourselves. So whatever he was showing people, that's how we were behind closed doors.
And I feel like a lot of the parents were, we were doing stuff that they wanted to do. I know my dad was a musician. He loved quartet music. And, whenever he got the chance to be in a quartet, he would be it. And, that's what he would sing when we were like wee kids, So it was in him. And, I feel like all of our parents were musicians to some degree, and, they wanted to see us succeed. So they were like really, blown away when we were actually doing stuff, and it was good, So, that's why I say I never really got resistance. They're the only people that really resisted were people that were jealous.
Right.
I'm not gonna
but you know what? I can say this. So, Claude, go ahead. What about your family support?
Oh, it was. Those of you who know that, I grew up in Buffalo for the most part. So my grandfather had the choir there.
Right.
And so all the Willises sang. That's all we did was sing, sing, sing. So when I started a group, my grandfather was like, yo, this is the best thing ever. And my parents were like black sheep Adventists. So it wasn't like there was ever any yeah, man.
Yeah.
And we had all those records that you could think about at home. We had all the R&B stuff, all the jazz stuff. They hung out with Shelton Kilby when he was playing in clubs in New York, all that kind of stuff, which we'll talk about next week because, the church ostracized him. And so he left for a time, and he was playing in clubs and doing all kinds of stuff. So my parents would go and see him, and so there's so much of that history.
Did we get him to be on next weekend?
I'm looking into it, brother. I would love to have Walter, Dave, if we can get him, and a couple other people.
I can make the contact.
Cool. Cool.
Wow.
But I'll say this, and the reason why I asked that is because even hearing Mark and Joey's perspective, and I know pretty much Merv's perspective because his parents and my parents were great friends growing up. So, but what we didn't know is that our parents were also like trailblazers as well, because all the criticism that we didn't get to our face, you can trust they were getting directly at them on a nonstop basis. So
Mm.
they were actually buffering that's their biggest support for us, is that they were buffering our ridicule,
Right.
so to
right,
speak.
right. And my mom would probably cuss somebody out, so I was
I need
good.
to ask my dad about
Yeah, they were getting it, man. And so, and that's why the discussions in my house weren't really that I was wrong, but could we tone it down so that they don't get so much backwash from their side.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
Don't want the backwash.
And it was really just, when you guys come around here, could you just kind of tone it down a little bit, because you know how Oakwood is. And I was like, yeah, well, I'm pretty sure we're not going to, but it's okay.
Can you do a project of
It's
just
okay.
hymns?
Oakwood doesn't have to come.
Just simple hymns? Can you just do that?
Simple hymns.
You guys remember when we
Doesn't have
got
to go.
shut down at that church in Detroit?
Say what?
No,
You guys
what?
remember we got shut down at the church in Detroit?
Shut down.
No.
You
Wait.
guys don't remember when we got shut down?
You were
Tell
about
the story.
I remember
No,
we were
Bishop-
we were
that was
about to
Bishop,
get shut down.
They were about to be.
Was it
Oh.
Bishop Sheard or
That's the one.
somebody?
That was
I
the church.
thought-
I think
he
I
did
do
shut it
remember
down.
that.
It wasn't a
As in
shutdown. It was an almost shutdown.
There were
We-
talks.
I don't remember that
of
being
it
a
was about
shutdown.
to be.
No, it was a shutdown for our manager at the time, road manager at the time.
Right.
Remember
he
Gene?
was the buffer.
He was the buffer. So he was at the side of the stage talking about,
Right.
In a full sweat.
Gene, what do you want? We're in the middle of a set. What are you doing? Dude was like, "Come here." I went over and got that note from him. Somebody had written, he was pouring sweat. I think he peed. I think he peed. I could have sworn that he peed on himself. So he gets the note.
What was the note though? What
The
did the
note
say?
said, if they sing another secular song, I will shut the concert down. And I gave the note to you, Claude. I think I gave the note to you. Okay, and it's a
What did
trip
I-
because
what did I do?
you say what?
What did I do?
You put.
Oh, we took the secular songs out. We took the secular songs out.
We
Oh,
I
did.
remember us
Did we?
having that
Put
discussion
windmills on the show.
Yeah.
in the
Because it
back
was
before
like
we went
windmills
on,
on
whether or
my
not we
mind or
were or
something.
weren't.
But don't
Yeah.
forget, we changed the whole throwback section. We didn't do the Michael Jackson. We did commission. We did, all the stuff for the throwback
You
section.
did. And that
That's
went
still
over
wasn't
well.
enough.
right. That's right.
Yeah, we
had
did the
whinings.
whinings because you did like "Ain't No Need to Worry" or something like that or whatever.
Yes.
We did all of this stuff in preparation.
Only
to
gospel
make
song I
sure-
know.
Yeah. We got Claude, you got saved in the back just before, right before we went on, just to make sure we were authentic in this thing. Man,
Oh my
that was,
god. I do.
Plain
that
in
was
the
funny
spirit.
though. That was funny.
That is.
That was
funny.
great.
Man, so this has been fun. We've been talking for an hour, Cats, and we
Oh,
could
yeah.
talk for a long time more. I want to really make this a bigger thing next week and try to get some of these other people we mentioned on it. So what I'm going to say to our listeners and anybody who's on, if you were at that Newbold show 30 years ago, or know someone who was, or if you went to Oakwood with us in the early days, send me or one of the guys a message and say that you'd like to either be a part of our Zoom next week, or we'll figure out what to do. But it'd be great to have perspective from people who were there or people who kind of lived it with us on the periphery. So I just wanted to say that. So thank you, Merv, for being with us, man. We heard some stories tonight.
Good stuff.
It's always
Good
fun, man.
Oh,
Yeah.
and everybody out there, get your vote in.
That's
Oh,
right.
nice.
Vote
Yes,
in.
Get your vote in.
Right. That is
At least
right.
here in
Right.
California,
Good
you should have your ballot, fill it out, and drop it off at a drop box.
Mhm.
I
Make
put
sure
it in
that your
today.
drop box is official. I just heard yesterday evening that they now have cardboard boxes that look exactly like the real drop boxes. So if
Wow.
the drop box is not locked and metal and bolted to the ground, do not put your ballot in there.
Well, you know
Unfortunately,
what?
it has to be
Having-
said these days.
That's California.
Having said that, Dave, I'm not taking any chances. I'm going to vote in person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same here.
I'm absolutely going to vote in person.
You going to the Staples Center? That'd be
Dude,
dope.
I'm going somewhere. I'm gonna bring a chair, and I'm gonna be there.
Vote
out for
here.
however long.
Yeah.
Save
Porta
cardboard
potty.
I've been
boxes.
voting
Yeah.
Vote
absentee.
here.
I've been voting absentee ever since we've been in take 6. So
Right.
because we travel all the time. So and I
Right.
think I remember early on that if you miss 2 consecutive elections, that they'll take away your absentee status. So
Oh,
Mm-mm.
yes,
Well, I
don't know if
voted.
that's
I
okay.
voted last week, and I thought about it long and hard, and then I just thought, okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and mail it. But LA is cool, and I know they don't do this everywhere, but LA, once they get it, I got an email from the registrar saying we received your vote and it will
Yeah,
be. That's
yeah,
nice.
me too. And you can track your ballot here as well.
Yeah. So
I
just
hear you.
everybody vote,
Nice.
whichever way is comfortable
Yeah.
for you. Just do it.
Well, I'm in Florida, so they're going to recount anyway. Might as well go ahead and get it in.
Get it in.
Get it
So
in.
everybody's been listening to the Spread Love podcast. Thank you for being with us. We love you guys. We will see you next week. Merv, can you be with us possibly next week again when
I
we?
think I can. I think so.
All right.
Thursday
All right.
again. We'll talk. Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we will talk. Thank you, everybody.
All right, guys.
Love you guys. Thank you much.
All right, everybody. Bye.
See ya.
That was fun.
We're still on live.
We're still live. Hey, guys.